Welcome to Field Lab Earth, the podcast that's all about past and present advances in the fields of agronomic, crop, soil, and environmental sciences. Today, we'll be talking to Guilherme Chudzik and Dr. Rodrigo Werle. For farmers in the Midwest, giant ragweed can be a giant problem. In Wisconsin, where long emergence windows, aggressive growth, herbicide resistance, and power pack seeds make suppression difficult, farmers are always looking for more hammers to hit this nasty nail on the head. In this episode, Guilherme and Rodrigo join me to discuss their work investigating cereal rye as an additional tool in this long-running fight. I'm your host, Abby Morrison. Let's talk about science. Hi everyone, welcome to the show. Today we have Guilherme Chudzik and Rodrigo Werle with us. Guilherme is a PhD student in weed science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, researching integrated weed management with a focus on cover crops and herbicide strategies. Originally from Brazil, he earned his bachelor's in agronomy from the University of Sao Paulo and his master's from UW-Madison. Rodrigo Werle is an associate professor and extension cropping systems weed scientist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He is the principal investigator of the Wisc Weeds Lab, where his research and outreach focus on integrated weed management strategies to help farmers improve weed control, protect crop yield, and promote sustainable production systems across the Midwest. Hello, how are you both doing today? Welcome to the show.
Hello, Abby. I'm good. Happy to be here.
Hello, Abby. Thanks for having us. Doing great. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. I am also looking forward to it. It's research taking place in our great state of Wisconsin, so I was excited to see some city names I recognize in here. So today we are talking about giant ragweed and hopefully how to have a lot less of it. So to get us started, can you just tell me, just for anyone who is unfamiliar with giant ragweed, kind of what it looks like, the damages that we're looking at here, some of the problems that are associated with it specifically? That would be a great start.
Awesome. So, giant ragweed, the scientific name of giant ragweed is Ambrosia trifida. So it's in the same family as a lot of other weeds, such as common ragweed, horseweed, dandelion. So giant ragweed is actually native from North America, so it's native from here. It has a lot of its cousins around here, and it looks like it's a branched plant. It's a three-lobed leaf, so we have leaves with 3 to 5 lobes. It can grow really tall. So as we walk in the field, you can see really tall plants sometimes. Those could be giant ragweed there, and it emerges very early in the season. So early in the season, especially here in Wisconsin, in gardens or even fields, when you see a round, thick cotyledon, most likely that will be giant ragweed right there. And because it emerged early in the season, that's why it caused problems in one of our crops, like soybean and corn. Giant ragweed is also the causer of hay fever. So once the flowers are out, especially now between August and September, the pollen of giant ragweed can cause hay fever, and some people that have allergy really struggle with that.
Fantastic. And so there are many tools that can be used for controlling pests like these. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about some of these. In your worksheet, you call them little hammers, so I would love to hear that analogy. But also if you could just talk about what some of the current hammers are, and also kind of a little bit more about cereal rye, which is one of the ones that we're hoping to discuss more in depth today. That would be great.
Sure. So when we talk about row crops, this is where we focus in our lab, soybean and corn. Usually the main tools to control weeds will be herbicides. So herbicides are effective, are usually cheaper and easy to use. However, one of the main problems that we are facing with giant ragweed is resistance. So as we apply a herbicide a lot of times in the same field, the population that we have there ends up developing resistance to that herbicide because it was used for a long time there. And one of the messages from integrated weed management programs is it's better to use a lot of little hammers instead of one big hammer. So the more hammers we use to drive a nail, more successful we'll be. So when we talk about giant ragweed control, herbicide is one of the hammers, but we are trying to look into cereal rye as being a second hammer, bringing some more pressure to control this weed and combat this weed, and not having this weed competing with our soybeans and corn for yield.
Yeah, fantastic. And one of the things you're looking at, well, first of all, I should ask how exactly cereal rye is used for weed suppression in this case. Just a high level, like when, how, all of those details. And then also maybe some of the issues that sometimes can make farmers a little hesitant to use this particular hammer, some of the issues that they come across. That would be fantastic.
Sure. So, cereal rye is a grass, and it needs used as a cover crop. So here in Wisconsin, we have a very harsh winter usually. But the good thing about cereal rye and why it's widely adopted, it's because it's winter hardy. So for us in Wisconsin, we would plant that in the fall. So September, October, November, we would drill that cereal rye in the ground. It will overwinter. So it will grow a little bit in the fall, overwinter, and come back in the spring. And that's when we have our focus of our research. So when we have that cover crop in the spring, we hope that that cover crop, in our case cereal rye, will help us control the weed that is coming with the cereal rye. So we have a head start of the cereal rye compared to the giant ragweed. I think one of the main challenges that farmers will have sometimes is when to plant that in the fall. Here in Wisconsin, we are fortunate because we have a lot of corn that is grown for silage. So that is harvested a little bit earlier in the season. So farmers have time to plant that cereal right earlier on. And the earlier you plant in the fall, the more growth you have in the spring. Um, Another reluctancy that we can see is that there is one more operation in your field because you have to either terminate your cover crop in the spring or even the planting operation in the fall could be something that farmers don't want to do because it takes more time, takes more resources, and also sometimes the competition in the spring because you have the cereal there. The cereal will be competing with your soybean, with your corn, just like a weed would. That's why we have a lot of bunch other research going on looking into that.
Perfect. So cereal rye is basically kind of I like shading things out, competing with just ground and nutrients and water and all those other things for the that the ragweed would need to thrive. But also, it sounds like there might be a little bit of overlap with some of these spring crops. So, can you tell me how, like, well, maybe I should talk about how and when you would terminate that as part of the actual research. So, uh, let's talk about what you actually did. So you were testing, just trying to figure out what are the best ways to implement the cereal rye. So how did you go about that?
Awesome. So, in this specific research, this was actually planned, and Rodrigo and José Nunes, a former PhD student in our lab, actually came up with this crazy idea because we don't really have the CRI there, but we are simulating only the biomass there because it's a system and we have a lot going on. When we have the CRI in the field, we have the CRI, we have its roots, we have a lot of things going on at once. And for this specific study, we wanted to see how can we simulate having only the biomass there. So we only have the CRI above ground biomass in a field. So what we did, we planted our CRI in the fall after corn for silage. Around late May, we went there and we harvested that CRI in the field. We were drying that in a dryer for a week, and then we knew how much biomass we had for each and every plot that we had. So went there, grabbed the biomass from the dryer, weighed each and every bundle so we know how much biomass we have in that specific square. And we had a range of biomass going from 0 all the way to 10,700 pounds per acre. So 0 is no biomass. We had some other numbers in between, and 10,700 pounds per acre is a lot of biomass. It's a thick mat of biomass, looks like a winter blanket of biomass there. So this is it's a good analogy to herbicide dose responses we do. We want to know if a herbicide will control weed or not. We test a lot of different doses, and we did the same thing with cereal here. And what we did there, we spread different amounts of biomass in the field, so we can see how much biomass we really need to suppress that giant ragweed in the field.
So I have a lot of questions. I need to collate them. So in your experiment, were you doing herbicides on top of the biomass at all, or was it just either herbicides or biomass is my first clarifying question.
In this specific study, we did not use any herbicides. We used only biomass. So we had an empty field with biomass.
So you were comparing it to what you would expect if you were to use herbicide instead? Was that how that comparison worked?
No, it was just an analogy where usually for weed science research, people are very used to have a dose response for herbicides, where you have no herbicide, 0.01 dose of the herbicide, and you ramp up. So you see what is the minimum amount of herbicide that will control the plant. Here we're trying to see what is the minimum amount of biomass to control the plant. And the main focus of the study would be the ED50, that is the 50%. So how much biomass we need to reduce either the number of plants or the biomass of plants by the 50%.
Okay, perfect. That is helpful to clarify. So then my next question is, so you're talking about using biomass, but, and this is probably just because I don't come from this background, I might need some clarification on the terms here. But since cereal rye overwinters, like in my mind, biomass is like once it's dead and is just like the remains of the plant. So if there's overlap between the plants being alive and the crop, the spring crop starting to grow and the emergence of the ragweed, I'm just wondering, like, where does biomass come in usually in this equation for a farmer that's actually using cereal rye?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a system, it's complex. And the cereal rye, it will die in the fall. And usually by the spring, we don't have a lot of biomass there on top of the soil. And then it will start growing back again. So when I'm talking about biomass, I'm talking about the cereal rye that is growing back in the spring. That's when we see a lot of biomass accumulation. So, and every time I say the number of a biomass, we're talking about dry biomass, not the moist biomass that we see in the field.
That's some really phenomenal questions here. Abby, if I may interject, excellent work here, Guilherme, explaining. Like Guilherme said, it's a systems based approach, and I think your question pertaining to like overlapping species growing at the same time. I think this is where Guilherme has been doing a lot of work looking at what we've been calling this planting green system, right, Guilherme? Particularly for soybeans. So, like Guilherme said, the cereal rye cover crop is planted after corn or soybean harvest in the fall. In the spring is when the rapid accumulation of biomass takes place. And according to Guilherme's research and also the research that was done by Nunes before, we need a good amount of biomass for weed suppression. But sometimes the farmers don't want to wait too long in the spring to plant. And this is when this question that you just asked about, like, can we have species coexist? This is where Guilherme is focusing a lot of his PhD efforts in. So right now we wanted to understand how much biomass do we need for at least 50% weed suppression, right, Guilherme? And we're talking a lot about giant ragweed here. We've done similar research looking at water hemp, and then I'll let Guilherme explain why we started on this two weed species first here in Wisconsin. But then, Abby, you also asked about herbicide work, right? So for this particular paper that we're discussing today, it was just the ecological piece the integrated piece, just the zero rye alone. But the work that Guilherme is doing now for his PhD and some of our former students have also looked at, we're looking at integrated strategies, right? Which is what our lab is all about, and goes back to the little hammers that Guilherme and you were discussing a few minutes ago. So Guilherme, why this water hemp and giant ragweed as the focal points of our research?
Yeah, so actually, as part of my master, I conducted a survey with farmers here, and we saw that these are the two main weed species that farmers have problem in the US. Usually, water hemp is the main problem, but giant ragweed is the second, and they differ a little bit. So sometimes farmers have both in the field, sometimes they have only one. Um, and probably the main challenges that we have comparing the two is that one has a big seed, so giant ragweed has a huge seed, while water hemp has a very small seed. And the challenge with giant ragweed is that it emerges very early in the season. And for us in Wisconsin, in the eastern part of the Corn Belt, it goes all the way through July, so it's an extended emergence window compared to, let's say, Nebraska, for example, where they have a short emergence window there in the spring. And water hemp is the opposite. It will emerge later in the season. It will go all the way to August.
That's amazing. Yeah, first of all love when there's like that intersection of the farmers and the researchers of, pairing what they need the most with the research that you're doing. Fantastic there. And yeah, I think that brings a lot of clarity. So just to put a final cap on this, so biomass can be like a live biomass, but it can also be like this died and we just put the dead plant on top. Okay, that was the missing piece for me in my understanding of what was happening here. So, okay, so you were testing dry biomass to see like what level of coverage do we need, which then in future could be integrated as you then take that into this more like moist and or living biomass. So this is kind of initial steps before moving into the larger system. So what did you find?
Awesome. So once we have all that biomass in the field, 42 days after our experiment was established, we went there and collected the biomass of plants. So with biomass, it's basically collecting the biomass of the weeds now. I say biomass a lot. I think I said that word 5,000 times through my presentations in grad school. So now I'm talking about the biomass of giant ragweed, which is a really good way to connect with how much seeds they can produce or even how much they can compete with the crop. We also measure the height of the giant ragweed and the number, so the density. And the main numbers that we focus here for this study are the density and the biomass of giant ragweed. With all the numbers, we ran some nonlinear regressions, some statistics on that side. And what we found is that for giant ragweed, we want to find the threshold of that 50%. So how much cereal rye biomass we need to reduce the giant ragweed biomass by 50%. And to reduce the giant ragweed biomass by 50%, we need around 3.4 thousand pounds per acre. And when we talk about density, that is the number of plants per area, we need a little bit more. We need 4,300 pounds per acre to reduce that number of giant ragweed plants per area by 50%.
So for someone who doesn't work in these, such as myself, my thought would be like, well, why is it only 50? Is it because after you hit 50, is there like a cap where it's like adding more is just not going to help? Is it just if we can get 50, then the crop itself will kind of be okay and it's not a big deal? Like what makes 50% the kind of magic number here?
I love your question because I need to monitor myself here because my mind went in a lot of directions here. It ties very well to your research because especially I will do a comparison with water hemp now. For water hemp, where we have a smaller seed, when we have those huge amount of biomass, we were able to reduce the water hemp biomass, the water hemp density, and the water hemp height by 100%. So we had 100% reduction. But giant ragweed is such a beast with that big seed that we actually never achieved that 100% reduction. So this was one of the motives that 50% is very pertinent to us here. And the second point is that the 50% is important because when we talk about herbicide resistance, it's a numbers game. So every percent that we can reduce will help us to mitigate resistance. So it's a good number for us to have a good gauge for farmers. And I think the third point on that is that these biomass numbers are actually attainable for farmers here in Wisconsin. If you're further south, you can achieve much more biomass. But here for us, we don't have a lot of growing degree days early in the season, so you really struggle to accumulate a lot of biomass if you don't have a lot of heat early on. So that month of May is very important for us, and that's why Rodrigo is promoting the planting green because we have our soybean growing there already, but we need the growing degree days so the biomass can be accumulated by that CRI cover crop.
And lastly, Guilherme, I think from a statistical standpoint, right, you also have a very strong stats background. So maybe you want to just describe, this ED50 is a strong parameter in your modeling efforts, right?
That's true. Also, when we talk about the statistics, the ED50, a good part of our models will have the ED50 as one of the parameters, especially the log logistic models. They have the ED50 as the point of inflection there. So it's the middle of our curve.
Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying the show. Interested in learning more? Guilherme and Rodrigo's paper, Cereal Rye Biomass Effects on Giant Ragweed Suppression Inform Management Decisions, published in Agrosystems, Geosciences, and Environment, is always freely available. If you are a certified crop advisor or certified professional soil scientist, you can take a quiz for continuing education units for this episode, which can be found in our show notes or on certifiedcropadvisor.org. Let's get back to the show. I love that. My brain is now also going in many directions. Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where because I don't work in it every day, I'm like constantly surprised by things that are very obvious. Like if you can't grow enough biomass with the amount of sunlight and time that you have, like then obviously the only way you could do it would be like buying it or storing it up some other way, which has its own set of costs and expenses. So thank you for that reminder that plants need time to grow, which apparently I needed the reminder on. Thank you very much. So I love that. That's fantastic. And congratulations on getting 100% on the water hemp. That's also amazing. That's great. I love that. Yeah, so I'm guessing just the bigger seed, it just has like enough nutrients in the seed to just punch up through the biomass is what that is. Okay. I did remember
Yes.
how seeds work. That is one thing I did not need a reminder on today. Well, gosh, wow, this is fantastic. Were there any, and if we already discussed this, it's we can skip this question, but did you find any like surprises in your research?
I think the case that giant ragweed was never suppressed, like the height was never suppressed by more than 50%. The plants that poked through the biomass, they actually were pretty tall. Um, and in this case, our research was in 2022 and 2023. 2023 was a very dry year for us. And even though it was a very dry year, the amounts of biomass that the giant ragweed plants were able to put out were very similar to what we saw in 2022. There was a quote unquote normal year. So that was actually surprising for us too. And comparing to water hemp, I think that was really surprising to me that water hemp we got to the 100% and we never got to that to giant ragweed.
Yeah, no, it's impressive. The plasticity that Guilherme is describing here, as far as that giant ragweed growth, is just overwhelming. It's an amazing plant. Once it's established, it grows really fast, and it's incredibly competitive. Guilherme has used the word biomass multiple times here, like he described, right? And it's this word biomass is incredibly important to our lab here. We're an applied research and extension lab that's sharing our knowledge back to our stakeholders, to our growers, our agronomists is an important mission of what we do, alongside working with amazing students like Guilherme here, so they can do top-notch research. And the reason why the word biomass, or that idea here, is very important, because right now, here in Wisconsin, across the Midwest, and all around the world, there's a very strong soil health movement. Our farmers, they have always been, but that soil health message is at the forefront today. Our farmers really care about their soils. They're doing their best, given their abilities to protect our natural resources. And this is where this cover crops come in, right? But then one thing that we realized a couple of years back when we started this research is that they didn't have a lot of guidance on where to go. Just growing a cover crop may sound good to one, but that's not good enough, right? You got to have a purpose for that cover crop. And what is the purpose of that cover crop, right? Guilherme has done extensive survey work that he has published recently. Erosion control, right? Microbial activity, those are all top priorities for the growers. But weed suppression is also there. So if weed suppression is one of our goals, just like soil erosion is, we need to have a recommendations, right? Here's where we make this parallel that Guilherme talked about with herbicides. When applying a herbicide, for the herbicide to work, we need to apply the herbicide at the right conditions, at the right dose. And it's the same thing for cover crops. If we want our cover crops to provide weed suppression, we need to establish them at the right time. We need to establish the right species. And an important component for weed suppression is biomass, right? And this is why Guilherme keeps talking about biomass. We need to have enough cover crop biomass produced in order to suppress weeds. So when we start talking or promoting biomass of cover crops as an integrated strategy for weed management, the first questions that growers had for us a couple of years back, all right, Rodrigo, great, but how much is enough? And we didn't have necessarily that answer. So all the work that Guilherme has done, that some of our former students have done, and we had a lot of students that have worked on this idea, Jose Nunes being one of them, Kobe Grant, Jacob Felsman, and so on. They've done a lot of work that we're now at this point, 5 years later, 6 years later, where Guilherme and I can go to our field days, we can go to our extension events, and we can say, look, farmers, if you want to benefit from having a cereal rye cover crop for weed suppression, this is the minimum amount of biomass you need to let that cover crop accumulate in order to harvest the benefits that you're after. And we have a very long winter, like it was said. So we have 6 months of cold weather, but we have very little GDD, or growing degree day accumulation, at that time, right? Therefore, understanding how this cover crops adapt to that, and what can we do in order to allow them to fill the gap that we have right now between our cash crops and allow them to produce enough biomass, is the area that we're working in right now. Just like we were talking about, is a systems-based approach. We need to manage our cash crops from a profitability standpoint. We want to have good yields. We want to have good economic returns. But if we want to bring these cover crops, we also got to manage them accordingly, so we harvest the benefits that we're after without impacting our cash crop and our overall system. So it's a beautiful, complex system to do research in. And like Guilherme said, every year is different. Some years we have longer winters, some years are very dry, some years are very wet. And this is what makes this very complex and beautiful and amazing from a research standpoint at the same time.
Ah, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, it's I'm always impressed not only by the resiliency and persistence of farmers, but also just the complexity of research continues to astound me with every single conversation I have on the show. But you brought up a good point that I would like to pursue a little bit more, which is terminating the cereal rye. I know if there's kind of an upper limit where the biomass is helpful or not. And it's growing potentially at the same time as your cash crop, you have to be careful that then you're not causing harm to your cash crop. So, can you tell me a little bit about not only just what it looks like for cereal rye to be terminated, and also like, did you find when to do that for best effect?
Yeah, that ties very well with an ongoing research that we have now that is actually funded by the United Soybean Board, where we have 11 universities working along with us, and we are trying to find the threshold or the tipping point where if we have enough biomass, we will suppress weeds, but at the same time, it will not hurt the yield of our crop. So in this study, long story short, we terminated the rye from soybean planting all the way to soybean at the V3 stage. So that's when the soybean has 3 trifoliolates. And what we found there is that the best time to terminate the rye without hurting our soybean yield is between the soybean emergence and the cotyledon stage of the soybeans. And that was enough for us to suppress a lot of water hemp. That study was done with water hemp, not giant ragweed, but we did not lose any yield because of that. And going back a little bit to the termination part of it, there are several ways to terminate rye. Several no, but usually here in Wisconsin we have the roller crimper. A lot of folks that do grow organic soybeans will use the roller crimper. And there's also the herbicides. We have several herbicides that would kill the rye, but the way to go is glyphosate. It's cheaper, it's faster, and it works very well with cereal rye. If you just say glyphosate out loud close to a cereal rye plant, it's probably going to die because it's very effective to control cereal rye.
I think one thing to add here, Guilherme did a phenomenal job explaining, because historically, right, Guilherme, our farmers would plant corn first, and then they would move into soybeans. So soybeans would be planted mid-May. And by mid-May, Guilherme is already seeing that high level of biomass we like to see for weed suppression. However, that trend has changed in recent years. A lot of work being done by the soybean agronomists, including our dear colleague here at UW-Madison, Dr. Sean Conley, has shown a lot of benefits of early planted soybeans. So in the past 5-6 years, we're seeing a major shift now where actually farmers are starting to plant soybeans early. And early here in Wisconsin, we're talking April. Okay, so our farmers are now planting soybean in April, but in April, the cereal rye hasn't had enough time to accumulate biomass. And this is where Guilherme's research becomes very important, because if a farmer wants to plant soybean early, yet benefit from high biomass cereal rye cover crop, they cannot terminate before or at planting time like it was done historically. What they have to do is almost like you still plant your soybean early to benefit from that high yield potential, but then you got to let the cereal rye cover crop and the soybean coexist for a little while. And that scares and concerns a lot of people. But through Guilherme's research, we have learned that we can make that happen. Farmers can plant soybean early. They can let the cereal rye grow for about 2-3 weeks after planting regularly, and then terminate before the E or V emergence or cotyledon stage that Guilherme was talking about. So that's kind of a novel system that we're working where we're trying to get the best of both worlds: the early planting of soybean, yet allowing cereal rye to accumulate more biomass. So fascinating research that's going to lead here to be the Guilherme's PhD dissertation. But the other thing that I want to say when we're talking about planting green high biomass, that's very compatible with soybean cropping systems. Okay, we also do a lot of research with corn, and with corn is not the same story. With corn, you can have 2,000, 3,000 pounds of cereal rye cover crop at the time of planting, but then at the time you're planting corn, you have to terminate that cereal rye. You do not want to let corn and leaving cereal rye overlap in terms of growth, because that would cause tremendous yield losses in corn. Corn is really sensitive to that system. So you can still plant corn green, assuming you don't have excessive amount of biomass, but the time that corn seed goes in the ground, that cereal rye cover crop better be terminated already, or you terminate that cereal rye that same day, because corn is very sensitive to competition with weeds and also cover crops. So this high biomass idea, planting green, terminating later, works incredibly well for soybean, but not for corn. So I just wanted to clarify that, because Guilherme's research is particularly focused on soybean systems where we're really struggling to control weeds post-emergence because our options are very, very limited. So I just want to clarify that for the listeners out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I would like to follow up on that one because on the same research, since we had a lot of cereal being grown all over the US, so we have a lot of data to work with. Um, I was able to have more than 1,000 plots being sent to me with data about the cereal. And one very good thing that we did was do a regression, and we saw that the biomass that we have is actually highly correlated with the height. Because if we go there and talk to a farmer about an amount of biomass, they'll say, okay, but what is 5,000 megagrams per hectare or 5,000 pounds per acre? And then I brought the numbers here for us because the number to reduce 50% biomass of water hemp and giant ragweed, we should target around the 3.8 megagrams per hectare. However, what does that mean? And for us, would mean something between 24 and 28 inches of cereal. So that would reduce the biomass of water hemp and giant ragweed by 50%. And as we move on to the density, we are talking about 5,000 kilograms per hectare, 5 megagrams per hectare, which is between 30 and 36 inches of height at that termination time.
Fantastic. That's so helpful to I can tell you guys come from like an extension office because you're like translating it, which is great. Also for people like me. So we've touched on several of these already, but future research, where are we going? What's on the horizon? Seems like we're kind of on the cutting edge already, but what's coming up?
Our research is going to a lot of places now because every time we have some kind of research focusing on something else, we see some small research that we can apply to our cover crop world right now. So we were talking about testing herbicide deposition under high biomass systems because we not only have our crop there anymore, we have some CRI standing, and that could lead to herbicide interceptation. We have some papers out of our lab on that already. So we're trying to move forward on that. We are also trying to see what are the herbicides that are more compatible, because each herbicide molecule have different chemical properties, and different chemical properties will interfere or will interact with our biomass in a different way. So those are also questions we're investigating for the future.
Great. So lots of great research has already been done on this. Obviously, a lot's coming up, but I will pull this to a close here because I'm sure we could just go forever and you guys have things you got to do today. So, first question is, if people want to learn more about any of the things that we've talked about today, where can they go?
Yeah, we have our channels. We have our website out there, whiskweeds.info, and then we are quite active on X, formerly Twitter, at Whiskweeds. Folks can find a lot of the work that we're doing. We're always trying to highlight the research, the amazing research that our grad students are doing. So look for us there. Guilherme is also quite active on LinkedIn, right, Guilherme? So I'll let you share that. So the social media platforms, they have become amazing tools for us to help get the word out. So we've been using that, and we also have our traditional ways. We still do our listservs, email listservs, so folks can reach out to us via email. But either the website or X, you'll find a lot of our information there. Right, Guilherme?
Yeah, then you can also find myself in LinkedIn. So my first and last name, Guilherme Chudzik at LinkedIn, and shout me a message and we can talk about it.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll include information for all of those in our show notes if you would like a direct link. Next question is then for anyone who would like to kind of take that next step and get involved, whether that's a researcher or a farmer looking to implement that, what would be the next steps to get involved?
I think one thing that we are trying to do here right now, Abby, is because we've done extensive research on a small plot basis, right? Small plot research is where we got all these initial numbers from. What we're trying to do now is implement that on farm. So we're starting to do more on farm research, take the main findings. We've been doing research again since 2018, 19 when we started all this work, summarizing the main findings and then trying to take that to our farmers. So this is where we're headed next. This is where we're reaching out to the independent crop consultants out there, where our CCAs and then our farmers that also support our mission here. We're working with them, and we're going to be putting strip trials out where they keep doing what they've been doing versus trying what we're recommending them. If they've never done cover crops before, if they've never planted green before, there's a lot of things that can be very challenging, right? So going full throttle, you can have a bad experience. So we're trying to tell folks, maybe let's put some strip trials. Let's be targeted about this, so you get a sense for it. You start learning more. You start evaluating whether you're truly capturing the benefits you want to capture within your operation. From there on, you can expand. So right now, I think the main thing here for practitioners out there is exploring, and we're helping to help them set up on farm research, if that makes sense. But then for, let's say, graduate students that might be listening in, or are independent, or crop consultants or CCAs out there, if they have research questions, or if they have something specific, some thought that came to their minds, we would love to hear it. So if they could use either our emails or the social media channels that we just shared, please reach out to us. Maybe we might be missing something that we haven't thought about yet, and we would appreciate your feedback. Is a two-way street here, right? So we get all these questions and ideas. We try to bring them to the research. We explain. More questions come up, just like Guilherme said, and sometimes we miss things. So if folks are thinking about something that we might be missing here, we're open to that. We look forward to those conversations, because that's how we keep bettering ourselves and what we're doing here to try to serve the next generation of influencers here, our students, but also our practitioners across the landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. Research is a team sport, for sure. So, final question then for you is, what is one fun fact about each of you that listeners wouldn't know if all they had was your research?
Okay, I'll go first, and I think probably sports. I really like sports, and I really like endurance sports. I'm really into running, and I'm trying to get into triathlon now. So yeah.
I really like that about Guilherme, right? Because Guilherme is always willing to go that extra mile, right? The analogy with sports here. Guilherme and I work closely on a daily basis. He did his master's with us and decided to stay on as a PhD student, but like he said, Rodrigo, if I'm going to stay on here in the same lab as a PhD student, I also got to do something else, right? And today he has a very important role within our lab, because not only he's leading his PhD work, but he's also very active as part of our herbicide eval program this year. For instance, we have almost 100 different trials that we're running, and he's very involved with that in the coordination of our lab's activities on a daily basis in the summer. So just kind of trying to set himself apart, but also challenge himself to do something different. So that's one thing that I really appreciate, and I've continued to learn from Guilherme and all the other students. Different people have different walks of lives, and different things they're passionate about. And this is the one thing, I guess, where I'm going with this is I always love learning from them, the different things that they enjoy, because then I get to learn more about that and also better myself, as as a PI of our lab, but also as a person. And a fun fact about me, like being a research and an extension specialist, it's quite busy, right? The job is very dynamic. The field research is busy, and then in the winter time, we're traveling. I love traveling. My job allows me to do that. So a career in extension research has allowed me to fulfill my dreams of traveling and working with people, especially young people like Guilherme and the amazing students that we have. And at home, I have two little ones. So when we have time, downtime, they are the joy of my life. So spending time with them outdoors is a top priority for me.
That is so lovely. What a just wholesome way to cap this conversation off. That's amazing. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you both for being on, for all the research you're doing, the connectedness that you have in your partnership, but also with the larger community. Seems like you're really kind of a hub for a lot of things in a way that is very satisfying to partake in as a podcast host. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you so much for having us, Abby.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening to Field Lab Earth. More information can be found in the description below. Thank you.